So we're live, Jamie. You know, I never go live without telling you.
Yeah, I know.
It would be uncool.
Cue the horns.
What?
Cue the horns.
You did it. Good timing.
Yeah,
I don't know how much of the background music people can hear, but you know.
only on the live stream.
Yeah. So yeah,
In the show before the show.
the
It's kind of
show
like
before the show,
a lounge. Like this is like
the
the
green
green
room.
room. Yeah,
That's
the
right.
green room. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I'm okay with it. Let's see. In the green room, we can advertise uh, a little bit of this, on the video. Follow us on Twitter. Check out past episodes at the website, Coffee Sketch Podcast, or on YouTube, find Coffee Sketch Podcast. I feel like that's my way of
Great. That's good. It's good.
promotions.
Yeah, I know.
I was wondering if I should save the shout outs for the show, or I should probably do them now. Right? I have a handful of shout outs.
Yeah, you can do them right now. Yeah,
I think
I have a
before
you do the shout outs, I have a question for you.
Okay.
And it's timely for today for the lounge before like the real episode. So did you get an email today talking about the urban sketchiness at the conference?
Yeah, I did. And I didn't read the whole thing.
Did you? Well, okay, so that ruins it. But so like I got to the end of it, and like my first response in my brain was, "Are they gonna have coffee?"
Well, it's scheduled for what? 10 o'clock in the morning.
No, there needs to be coffee.
That's right. Yeah, we should do. I was thinking about that though. That event. So the urban sketching in San Francisco. I was thinking about a coffee sketch podcast takeover.
During it, like ooh.
Yes. Live streaming the live sketch tour.
Sketching at the sketch tour that we're not conducting.
No.
Yeah, so
we know the guy.
Yeah, we know the guy. It'd be kind of like a guerrilla takeover. Yeah. Are you getting a lot of glare?
It is now, yeah. It's like
it's like a sunburst. Like what?
Is it the second coming? Second coming arrives in Austin, Texas. It's quite a neat effect. I could see you.
Can you see me?
It's quite a glow. It's nice though. I wish I had that kind of
fun light for the lounge.
It's been like gloomy and raining
like
for a week. Yeah, I know, it looks real hot. So the shout outs are, so I had a lot of friends join my Zoom based final presentations for teaching. So while you try and figure out that light situation, lens flare, it's better now. You need a little shroud. I see now you're starting to disco it up like the song we were just listening to before this song. Man, that's even worse. So I'm still gonna try these shout outs. So I had final presentations for the class, one of the classes I was teaching. And it was Zoom based for the graduate students, and we had people from all over the world join us. So we had Jamie, my co-host. Thank you, Jamie. We had Kevin Hui from Archie Marathon, Jennifer Kretschmer from San Jose, Leah Bear from the San Jose, San Francisco Bay Area, um, Amy Baker from Michigan, but was on Zoom, and who else? Who am I forgetting? I think those are all the people that I invited, and they sprinkled all my friends around. We had 5 or 6 rooms going at the same time, Zoom rooms for presentations, and so it was a lot of fun. And this is my public shout out announcement to all my colleagues that took the time out, because it's on if you're on the East Coast, it's Monday night, 7 to 11 almost. We went. If you're in Central Time, then it's, bump it back an hour like Jamie. And the West Coast people is just like happy hour for them. So anyway,
No,
I
it
know
was fun. Yeah, it was good. It was good as the not Daft Punk like drops in the lounge. Yeah, no, it was great. It was strange because I was in a room with folks I didn't necessarily know, which is totally fine as for that kind of a presentation and conversation. Yeah, no, it was very evident, like kind of looking around, of all the folks that you had invited in, people that you'd mentioned before. So that was pretty great. Congrats to you, and then congrats to your students.
there's the Zoom pic. Well, thanks for the. It's hard work. I don't want to say it's all a cakewalk. There's Jamie, and there's a few of our celebs. But yeah, it's a lot of work, and it's tiring. So I'm glad we're done. A lot of good student work, and it's a tough class. I don't know. You've been on this review before, the comprehensive design class, which then winds up being let me turn that off. Winds up being a very technical integrated class, and it's a lot of work for people to even in one semester, right? One building, one semester. It's a lot of work. So you got a few faces of students, faculty, and guest reviewers here. So anyway, so are we warmed up enough? We want to jump into our.
Yeah, I mean, shout outs are done. We've talked about school a little bit. We're probably going to talk about it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm ready. You ready? I figured out my lens flare.
Yeah, it looks a lot better.
Oh,
I don't know how'd you do. Whatever you did worked. It's great, fantastic. And all right, well, what that means. I have to do some things behind the scenes, right? I've got to turn some music off, then I've got to switch to other intros. It's just as much work as teaching. All right, let's go to the show. Jamie, how are you?
good.
Is that loud enough?
It's loud enough. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I could see you now too.
Me?
We had
Well,
some
okay.
technical difficulty.
You say that, and what's interesting is this is the first time I've noticed this on our live streaming. For those who are listening only as the podcast, we do actually live stream sort of the raw cut of the podcast, both on YouTube and Twitch. And so when we do kind of a little bit of a green room lounge backstage area before we kind of cue up the real intro and dive into the episode, which you're actually listening to right now. But the first time I've noticed this is when we make that transition from the lounge to the intro sequence, and my camera kind of goes off here locally. I noticed that in our setup for our studio, it actually calls it the backstage area. So like it tells you that you're backstage, and so I just thought that was pretty clever and awesome. And yeah, I'm just sharing way too much. I think probably.
Technology is working in our favor. Puts puts you in the backstage. Although as the owner of the account, I don't think I see exactly the same things as you see. Does it black out or does it play the intro video?
No, I see the intro video,
Oh, okay.
but then I have this other camera, like, and it says the host can see you. You're backstage, and
Oh,
I'm like, oh, so I could be like making like all kinds of gestures at Kurt and whatever, um, but I don't do
okay.
that, of course, because I only just noticed that that's what that whole
Oh,
area was. So
that's funny. Can you see me in the little do you have a little
no,
small
I'm backstage, and you're the host. So
Oh, I see. I have all these little windows. So I have a small window of you. I have a
you have
small
other people in the green room.
what's
Is that
that?
what you're saying? Do you have other guests in the green room that you're not telling me about?
Yeah, just in case things go south. It's
You're like, Jamie, brought you here today to tell you.
do we talk about sports, right? What's this video on the video you see this gesture right here, right?
Yeah,
Bring in the righty. Go to the
yeah,
bullpen.
yeah.
Not quite. I love using that little signal, because if you know, you know.
That is such a deep cut on our podcast.
We're gonna use that. That's gonna be a
Yeah,
great little clip
yeah.
in our experimental social
If you
media.
if you told me, I would have gone and like got the Expos ball cap and been wearing it today, and that
Oh,
would have
that's a
been like, oh, just like take it off and just throw it, and
kick dirt.
yeah, kick dirt.
The well, I mean, not to talk a lot about sports because I don't get enough time to watch a ton, but they did change some rules in baseball that
Yes,
has drastically sped the game up and made it more exciting, right? More scoring. They made the bases larger. They put a clock on the pitcher. And did they change the baseball wind?
that I don't know. I knew
I'm
about
not
the other
sure.
two. Yeah, I mean,
Maybe
I'm
they
go-
didn't.
I'm going like I have not watched any. I have not been to any games. I haven't been to a baseball game in quite a while,
Well,
actually.
the Expos don't exist anymore, so
I know they don't exist. But we've talked about that baseball is like is also near and dear to my Crawley family heart. But yeah, no, I'm actually going to go to a game in San Francisco. So, which I've been to games in San Francisco when I was a little kid, um,
at the old Candlestick.
at the old Candlestick, as well as the old Oakland A's stadium.
Oh, oh,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and um, been to both Rangers stadiums, um, and not the newest one, but and then been to the old Atlanta Braves stadium, um, Baltimore. So been to Camden Yards. Um, Seen games in. I don't know if I know. I've never seen a game in Toronto. Montreal a bunch, of course. So
The
that's it.
Montreal, or was it Toronto's stadium that had the the retractable?
That's the Olympic Stadium in Montreal. Yeah,
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 yeah.
with the umbrella.
It
Yeah,
was quite a yeah. That's right. Yeah, I remember um. It's one of the earliest of those kinds of uh, opening, closing roof cover devices. So
yeah. The Big O. Yep.
yes, right. The big O. The yeah, so yeah, it's kind of fun to go to go to a town and go to a stadium. I've done a little bit of that. My
Oh, yeah,
brothers
I've been to
also.
the national. I've seen the Nationals play, who basically are the Montreal Expos. So we've come full circle.
Yeah,
Hopefully, I've proven my worth. You're not going to the bullpen. And
you stay. We'll keep
yeah,
them in another inning. You
yeah,
know,
you can just tell the people in the green room, just it's okay. There's
that's
snacks,
right. That's right.
maybe some coffee. Coffee's
That's
good.
right. Speaking of coffee, what is in the mug today?
So I have gone back to um, I found it, and it was sort of like a comfort vibe. They had the maple pecan at the
Oh,
store of Starbucks, and so it sort of had gone up. I'd kind of gone up, ratcheted up the levels of my coffee sommelier experience, and then now I've come back to kind of the not back in a bad way, but kind of come back to the like let's go back to an old comfort standard. Um, so it's good. Um,
yeah.
and
Well, there's
and it was
nothing
a
wrong
bigger
with
bag.
that.
So it's going to be one that's going to be just going to like hanging around for a little while. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. You know, we drink the coffee. We don't just talk about it, you know. So sometimes having a full pound bag is comforting. You're not going to run out.
Right. 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 So what about
I
yourself? What's the coffee du jour?
I guess I'll begin the ratchet of climbing the rootless ladder, and I think I've grabbed one that I don't think I've bought before, but I probably have had from the coffee shop that or not roast, but serves rootless coffee. It's called Out of Your Element, and it
Oh,
has the
no.
artwork, which I should have
You haven't
grabbed
talked
it.
about this one. Yeah.
I don't think so, but it's been around for a little bit. It's if you're familiar with um, now I can't remember the stinking movie. What's the movie? You're out of your element, Donnie. Uh, with John Goodman, John Turturro, the bowling movie. What's the bowling movie?
Oh, Big
Is it
Lebowski.
Lebowski?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it is Lebowski, right? Where it's all yeah, it's all the yeah. Anyway, so the artwork is like a John Goodman bowling ball. Got this thing, so it's kind of like a light medium roast with some citrus and sugar notes, and it's pretty good. It's actually uh maybe gives damn fine cup of coffee a run for your money from time.
Ooh. Ooh, that's almost blasphemous.
Yeah,
Um,
I'll try to keep it on the DL.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I hopefully like when I mentioned to you this week that, or was it last week? Um, it was offline. It was an offline conversation, but I mentioned that there's a David Lynch film festival, like a retrospective of all his work in Dallas, at a historic theater, mind you. Um, but yeah,
But
it
not
just
not the historic theater
not
in
the
Dallas.
not no, it's not that one. Um, but yeah, no, it's so anyhow, yeah, that was when you said the damn fine cup of coffee. I'm gonna go and see Fire
Cool.
Walk with Me in the theater.
Oh,
Yeah,
lucky.
yeah, it's gonna be fun. I mean, I did see it in the theater when it did come out originally, but I've not seen it in the theater since. So
Oh yeah, that sounds exciting. I think I told you in the about a year ago there was the local art gallery here had a piece from
yes,
David Lynch,
yeah,
and I sent you a picture of it, I think. But
yeah.
so that's we won't get a fire walk with me, but we had a Lynch in some private collection show up. So that sounds exciting. And so, you know, I didn't. It's well, partly it is my fault that I haven't yet caught up all the way, and so now I don't know if Twin Peaks is on Netflix at the moment. I waited too long,
No,
and the movie is not on. I'll have to find out when they may put it back, which maybe never. I don't know.
you have to go to your local video store
That's
and
right.
yeah, track it down.
Oh
So
wait, right. Yes,
yeah,
yes. Where is the local video store?
there's
That'll
probably
be
like
a
there's probably like one like blockbuster on like life support in like the UP, and
that would be cool. I it could be. It could be.
just saying.
Well, should we you want to jump into the sketch?
Well, yeah, I
Or
mean
was
that
there some so the only thing I was going to say, sorry, it's kind of cut you off, but the sketch talk about a couple of sketches. It's kind of in the theme of we just got through the semester. Jamie and I were talking about my students, but students in general and the process. And it kind of in a text message, I said to Jamie that there's a sometimes it's an interesting, it's a strange anxiety that I pick up from the students, especially as the semester comes to the end and they need to wrap up their work, that they uh, only want to show like the most polished, finished drawing, rendering, anything as far as a piece of, um, output, required deliverable, a drawing, a model, even their physical models. And I feel like it's a sort of a what's the word, like a stigma from or a side effect of like Instagram and social media that showcases things so well. They seem perfect,
right.
but there is definitely a lot of talk about like filters and especially with people's photos,
Well, I
right?
mean,
You can
it's a
definitely
curated,
enhance.
yeah. I mean, it's a curated image of reality. I mean, that's I mean, and that's not any one person. That's every person. Um, but yeah, and I think that as you're sort of describing it, I just was at A&M for an advisory council meeting, and it's sort of the same thing. Their students there are wrapping up their semester. Um, M is wrapping up her semester, and so it's that time of year where everybody's you know anxiety levels. I think anxiety, the way you described it, is the perfect word to describe this time. I mean, and even when you and I were students, that's not any different. Or even as professionals, with a deadline, there's that imposter syndrome where you're like questioning all of your own work, um, and is it good enough? um, but I think what you and I were talking about is exactly sort of the more important crux of the matter, and it's one that you and I really try and highlight and share our own personal experience here on the podcast, is that you know the the end product sometimes is the process itself, um, and it's not just a sales pitch ability that architects and designers have. It's that we are trained not to create perfect Instagram images. We're trained to think critically. We are trained to problem solve, and sometimes there is more than one answer to the problem. And even when you get to the answer, you hopefully are still evaluating that answer. And I think that that's in talking to your students, just this past week. I mean, that was really evident, and in some of their cases, more evident than others. Some students, don't get as far in their projects as they'd probably like to, or how much they aspire to. That doesn't mean that the project's bad. It just, it's still a process. They can still learn a lot from it. And if the jurors or the critics or the whomever are there, hopefully we're listening critically to where they are and the questions that they're asking about their projects, so that we can have a conversation about that. Because at that point you're meeting somebody where they are in their process. And so, yeah, I think that's it's it's maybe two different layers of conversation, but I think they're both pretty related for sure.
Yeah. And I try as much as I can to like tell my students, bring the process. They tend to like forget everything and they leave it on their desk and they only bring the finished things. I'm like, bring that process to the crit. You don't need to talk about every single thing, a model or a sketch or something, but you can have it there and the jury can pick up on it or not if they. But they can at least observe what is uh, kind of in the room and part of the process.
Well,
So I
and
like.
even in that, there's a curation process too, right? The sketch or the early render or the study model or the BIM model or the whatever, that was a couple weeks ago. There might have been a really really neat idea in there. You might have thrown away all the other ideas, but there might have been a really neat idea in there. And so having that, even just as a touchstone while you're presenting the work, um, even if it's not really a topic of conversation or something that you actually even reference, but it's there. Um, that's it's comforting. I mean, I recall many times, even when I was teaching, kind of various forms, and some students got it and kind of understood it. They were reluctant. They didn't kind of buy it. They're like, is this guy really telling me to bring my crappy study models and my crappy drawings that weren't finished and weren't complete ideas? But oftentimes those ended up becoming something that became part of the conversation. Inevitably, you're looking at a finished image and a more finished idea, and then referencing something that you see in that earlier thing, and saying, "Oh, I get it. I see the through line. I see how you've manipulated. I see how you worked the idea to get to this point." That's that's the energy and the skill set that I think students are developing when they're in design school.
Yeah, the I think you put it just a minute ago. You said the process is the product, and I think here. Let me turn these sketches on. There's one other thing I was gonna say before we dig into the sketch that you have, because it is about the process. But sometimes for me, and I don't, not sure if it's me being overly concerned about like this sort of Instagram tendency, but sometimes I'd rather see like something messy in like if they built a physical model that has a little bit of glue or has like, rough edge here and there because they do spend so much time like and then there's so many tools like Enscape and Twin Motion and rendering tools that I mean that's a whole other tangent of like when I was your age.
Well, it's funny you say that.
But
It's funny you say that. I was talking to somebody in the office, and um, they were describing some things that they were actually, we were sort of self-critiquing, a couple different projects, and a bunch of stuff was on the table, and somebody was suggesting, to dodge in Photoshop a couple things and then burn a couple areas over here. And it struck me as this person was describing it that they themselves had never ever dodged and burned a photo in like in real life
in the
in the
lab.
lab, like with chemicals that, if you ingest too many, or you know there's probably some brain cells that have been killed. um
Yeah, right. Yeah, the dark room. Oh my God. Well, yeah, and funny. Anyway, and the other thing is that there's probably faculty that like want to see that sort of Instagram style image,
right.
but I still feel I can connect more when there's a little uh when the polish isn't quite there, because I can almost use, as my I had a teacher say, use your mind's eye and fill in, and sort of fill in the blanks and things like that. Um so anyway, so we'll, probably more of that will come out in these sketches, but the as a maybe we can make a little timestamp here for students, and I can clip this out and say, here's a couple of drawings from Jamie, an existing photo of an existing uh, aging building, and then some research on that building, which we do use the Sanborn maps in one of the classes. So there, that's not unfamiliar. So there's a drawing here of what we call the Sanborn maps, which are the Sanborn Insurance Company, right? Fire insurance.
Yep.
Did a survey of all built um, properties so that you can have an assessment of what was there in case of a fire.
And they were
Um,
beautiful hand drawn maps
yeah,
of downtown areas, and
to
yeah,
scale.
to scale. And they would do them periodically, so you would get sort of like the 1901 version and then the
Hmm.
1911 version, of the same location. They
Yeah,
were often color coded, and then had some kind of other coatings on them, um, not coatings, but codings on them. Enunciate, Jamie, and to kind of help you better understand what that built object was and how it was changing, over time.
yep,
So, they were looking at it from a fire insurance kind of standpoint, but today, we use them historically to kind of get snapshots of these
hmm,
locations. And if the building's still there and has been altered over time, the coupling, the photos we see, the historic photos we might have, and the maps, it really can really start to tell a really more complete sort of detective work story of this place. And then make decisions. I mean, that's really what we're kind of coming back to is kind of making decisions design wise, preservation wise, or other.
yeah, yeah. The Sanborns are a lot of fun that way, and I agree that those evolution over time can be witnessed or observed in these various maps. Um, and so anyway, so you sent me a couple of these, and I composed them into this nice, beautiful collage. But to the left, right, is our more uh, familiar Instagram square sketch from Jamie, black and white, of this building in the lower right. And then in the middle, which something we probably haven't talked about, a technique of Jamie's very much at all on the podcast. So this might be a first or a second of this sort of technique. But you know, given, I mean, what I'll say about it as far as process, and then I'm sure you'll have even more to fill us in on. But we have the existing building in a photograph. We have a sketch to generate the ideas, and then we have this in color, a more polished sketch, which is still not yet a finished building or a rendering for a finished building, but it sort of furthers the idea from the sketch as far as some of the elements, like I can see your, focal point on the corner, which this building kind of turns the corner. So how do you re-engage the sidewalk, the street life? And then, in this case, straightening the lines a little bit and giving a little more texture to the ornament and brick detail stuff of the building. But it doesn't give you everything, right? Like you haven't rendered everything to the nth degree. There's a little bit of what we call entourage, which is people and benches and furniture at the street level, plant life, sky, things like that. Um, but it's not, it's still kind of a sketch, but I think you'll tell us that it's not just a sketch,
Right.
which is the neat part.
Yeah. So what it is exactly what you're, describing to a certain degree is most, if not all of my projects begin with a coffee sketch. And so that, the one that Kurt said, the familiar black and white, off to the left is, it is really me trying to get acquainted with this building, and in my mind and getting my head kind of wrapped around it, knowing that I'm going to work on it and trying to imagine, aspects of it that I immediately see, and confirming some things about, where the final product might end up landing, and making some design decisions, realizing that I'm probably going to come back and change them. Um, but that's where that sketch starts. But the image on the right that Kurt was, aptly describing as, the the process is the product. I think this is really indicative of that. um, it is a Photoshop render, utilizing a different photo of this particular property, um, rectifying the perspective, cropping out certain elements, working back to the composition that I'd sort of planned in my mind, and through some sketches, not just the coffee sketch, but there's iterations of other sketches, oftentimes on trace paper, where I'm just sort of planning out what I'm doing and kind of making mental notes to myself. Often at that point, we didn't pull one in for this episode, but often at that point, I'm just sort of making notes to myself. I'm writing the words down of the things that I'm seeing. I might not draw them all, but I might say, this building needs a sign. The sign's going to go here. And then sometimes I'll even ask myself questions. Should the sign wrap? Should the sign be illuminated? Should the sign be metal? And it's just sort of, and I'll list them off, boom, 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 like almost bullet points. I'm not making any judgments or questions. It's more, I'm making questions. I'm not making judgments at that point. And I'm giving myself time to think about it, but I'm trying to enumerate the ideas, for myself. It's just part of my process, something that I've developed over time. But those sketches then inform the work that I'm doing in Photoshop. And so using Adobe, and modifying different layers of this image, and then finding, sort of from closer up images, what the actual brick pattern, is underneath it. And so trying to pull some of that through sort of as a theme, and sort of an artistic render of that reality. So kind of layering in that image, doing a lot of dodging, burning, cutting, cropping, of pieces and parts, adding in windows that are, again, more appropriate. If you look down at the image to the bottom, if you can pan there really quick, Kurt, of the existing, you can see that there's actually no windows in this building currently. So, this building has been abandoned for decades. Building's over 100 years old. Was a department store, and was originally like a two-story building. The two-story building elements of it were retained, and then a larger building was built, in its place, or added onto. And so that's where we arrive at this particular property. And that's pretty pretty common across the U.S. Of how buildings kind of get modified over time. But as you can see in the photo, there's no windows in this. So all we're relying on is some of the interior photos. We were actually able to find some of the windows. So knowing what the proportions of the frames were, and that they did change from front to back slightly. So tried to pick up ways to render that in Photoshop. So created some elements, duplicated those elements, modified them for the actual perspective itself, played with some color, but treated it almost like a matte painting at that point. The sky, same thing, brought in sort of a matte painting of the sky, then altered it because I wanted it to be more akin to the sketch itself as it was developing in Photoshop. Same thing with the storefront level at the bottom, kind of modifying it. Canopy, tie rod canopy was in place, but it was damaged. So I had to do some cleanup on it. But here's the part of the process that Kurt and I were talking about. Reason why we wanted to highlight it today was there came a point where this image that you're seeing in the upper right was about 70% there. And that's just sort of picking a number. At that point, printed it off quite large so that I could actually draw on top of the image some of the elements on the bottom. The storefront area there was a level of detail that I really wanted to achieve with certain things, and to Kurt's original introduction to this, also wanted it to feel like a sketch, even though a lot of it was originating in Photoshop, from an original photograph, with Photoshop elements and textures and things like that. I didn't want it to feel just Photoshop or just cartoony. And so I wanted the texture, I wanted the grit that I get from the type of sketching that I typically do. I wanted to introduce that to the image because I felt that it would really ground this sort of new active retail space that I was sort of envisioning for the building. That's not where this project finishes or the image that you're seeing finishes. I, at that point, scanned the image and then brought it back into Photoshop, layered that scan over the top of the original Photoshop, so it just became another layer in there, and matched everything up that I needed to match up so that I still had, a fair amount of resolution over the image itself, and then was able to manipulate the entourage even further with some more photo elements, and then change those photo elements to appear more sketch-like, akin to my drawing, so that it almost becomes indecipherable, which parts I'm drawing and which parts I'm pulling from an entourage library that we're creating. And at that point, there just sort of hits a point where you just have to kind of say, I'm going to put a pin in it. This is where it's going to be for right now. You're getting the point across that there's some Italianate details on this multi-story brick building, but it's been revitalized, and you can imagine, loft living above a retail space. So that's how this sort of drawing becomes what Kurt and I refer to more as hybrid sketching.
Yeah, and I'm glad you walked through the process because I don't think we have had we if we've ever had this a version of this kind of sketch before, probably only one other time, and so it's kind of nice to hear. I mean, it's pretty laborious, sort of returning circular, sort of iterative process going back and forth between hand and Photoshop and layering the effects over top of it. But I mean, I think that just proves that they're neat. You can't just sort of push print or push done uh, one time, right? There's always a little bit of editing and tweaking and things like that that have to
And there might be somebody, who kind of looks at this and says, well, why didn't you just do it like on Morpholio Trace or something like that? And I think that's just because I'm not, I don't feel the same level of skill with that yet. But for those, and Kurt likes to tease me about it. um, you know, it's, all that stuff's just technology. All that's just a new pen to me. Um, so, don't think that I'm not already trying it. It's just maybe you haven't seen it yet. So,
oh, that sounds like a hint. But the uh yeah, that's actually brings up really good point as well, that the last sort of bit of that we talk about with students a lot is um it's still just a tool, right? No matter any piece of software, any pen, you know, analog versus digital, all those things are still tools, and it's all about using your own creativity and process, really, because it not very few people can take a pen and produce a beautiful image right away, right? So it's about sort of the practice and the process of that practice in order to use the tools that you have. Just as Jamie was alluding to, it's like maybe he is experimenting with some digital sketching tools, but yeah, and so, but even in the meantime, the hand drawing plus some Photoshop, which Photoshop is um, a super powerful, uh, pixel pushing image editing software, and the it's kind of funny. I haven't used it in much since it lately, but I have tinkered with it. But then I talk to the students, and there's like tools in Photoshop now that didn't exist when I was there, when I was a student. But anyway, that's we won't go down that road. So, well, thanks, Jamie, for the tutorial. I hope we can I will clip this out and gonna share it with my students.
yeah, no, well, I'm glad that you wanted to talk about this one, or at least the topic, and then that this sort of dovetailed, really well to it, because I think it's one where, um, the process can be a little bit messy, and this is, in this particular case, as much as it all feels and appears to be all kind of coming through me, there is still some collaboration with my team, um, on these types of projects. But at the same time, I'm working from a perspective as an architect where I've not necessarily worked in really, really large firms or large teams. So we were kind of having this discussion, interestingly, with some of your students, kind of at the end of their review, and someone was sort of asking, from a comprehensive design point of view, like, their building, admittedly, was pretty big, and intentionally complex, to really kind of challenge them. And I got all that, and they probably got all that too. But someone had kind of asked the question, like, is this kind of real world? Like, how many folks would be on this kind of a team? And and I think it's again, kind of how you practice. There are certain firms that, yeah, that would be a fairly sizable team, and they'd have a very particular workflow, and you get a very interesting product. But then you'd also have, you have some, for lack of a better word, like, gritty, small, medium-sized firms where they hand this to two or three people and say go, and they'd have consultants and things like that too. But that's another reality. And so I think for me, it's more about, kind of knowing who you are, how you want to work, and who you want to work with. And and finding the right place to do those things and feel supported in it, you know, feeling that it's a really, conducive to who you are and what your goals are and, and life and all those things. Like there isn't just one way. And I think that part of it for us, as we talk about the sketches on the podcast, is if there was one takeaway that I hope folks get is that there's not just one way to do it. And anybody who tells you that is lying. It's just they're just lying. Um,
Yep.
and and for me, I feel, I was talking to, my first design professor, this past week, and I was joking with him. I said, there's days that I still have imposter syndrome for myself. And I actually shared with him this particular project, and the sketches and sort of what I was doing and how I was approaching it. And he just was like, I hope you don't ever feel that way, and he's like, always remember to trust your instincts. I mean, you might not like your end result, and I kind of, he didn't say much more than that, but it's like it kind of hit me as like, yeah, you know, realize that, whether you're, 1 year out of school or still in school or 20 years out of school, at some point you have to trust yourself a bit. Give yourself a little bit of grace. And, it's not always going to be perfect. And so for me, part of that is there's a frustration when it's taking longer than I want it to, right? But this if the process is also the product, um, you know, these sketches are, indicative of that, and hopefully communicative for folks who need to imagine a possibility for their building. Um, Helps me have the conversation with them for sure. And no one sketch is going to turn something from derelict building into, livable reality. It's a whole lot more complicated than that. And I'm not trying to oversimplify it, but sometimes the sketch is, you know, and the process of the sketch, the conversation starter of that sketch gets it going. And and there's a lot of value in that a lot of folks um, really minimize, and I don't think that they should. And I think students, for where they are in their careers, and young professionals, shouldn't minimize the thoughts and intuitions that they have about design. And that's the thing I'm really really passionate about, is that, it's not my idea, that's the only way to approach it. There's lots of ideas about how to approach it. Um, and that's why you and I always are referencing other architects and designers and artists and places and projects that inspire us, because they do, and they inspire us in different ways. Sorry, I've totally gone on my own little soapbox tangent here, and you've been like super patient, like nodding your head, and you're like, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, no, 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 it's all good. It's right on, and it's not even close to a rant. But um, yeah, I mean, I think I just one only thing I would add is, when I talk to my students, and when I say students, I mean really, it also then becomes clients and consultants and the team that you work with. But is you can't show nothing, right? You can't talk about nothing. Like if you have something in some form, it can make that conversation, as you were saying. So, um, that yeah, don't feel the need to something is not quite ready. It's ready when it's time to talk about. So yeah, we could definitely, you know turn this into a whole series on its own. I think just because of the the value, and well, the value of information, the experience, all those things, and all the pitfalls that we've already been through, and try and teach people to avoid. But yeah, I guess if we were to like kind of end on the idea, I really like the idea of like trusting instinct and intuition. There's only so much technical capacity that you can absorb in school, and then the rest has to kind of come from inside. And so, like I said, we can go on and on, and but we won't. And I'll just say thanks, Jamie, and we got some exciting sketches for the next one. And so, for all those listening or watching, stay tuned. And I'm gonna stay tuned because I want to find out about this experimentation from Jamie that's going on. But
Save
I
that for
will.
the lounge. We'll save it for the lounge. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I will wait uh, just alongside everybody else for that one. So see you later.